Good evening, all. It's Devora Krasnianski from Adai. And tonight we'll be talking about Shalom Bayis and a peaceful Yom Tov, and just a little bit about the Adai organization. Adai is about empowering couples and enriching relationships. And to that end, our programs offer the tools and mind empowering force of your life. And we have different workshops, the website, which is adai.org, all A's, ADAIAD.org. That's ADAIAD.org. And we have our daily marriage tips or relationship tips called Just One Thing, they're nice and short, and you can get tips called Just One Thing, they're nice and short, and you can get that on Facebook, Instagram, or actually through your WhatsApps. We also have online workshops, courses. We used to have in-person courses. We'll see what happens again after Corona. Individual coaching in areas such as preparing for marriage, dating, individual coaching in areas such as preparing for marriage, dating, setting up the marriage, invigorating the marriage, and resetting the marriage. And so to that end, like I said, we have many different workshops, and I'm very grateful to Velvel and Estie Lipskier for offering to do this workshop about Shalom and why you are so passionate about this, and then just jump right into your...
Thank you for joining. So just a very short synopsis of the passion that me and Velvel have about this topic. So we've been married, Baruch Hashem, 16 years, and things weren't always so great. When I mean great, I mean communication and getting along and learning how to negotiate life. So we did a lot of therapy work and just a lot of individual work to try to come to a place of understanding each other, and so therefore being able to communicate, and have, the best marriage that we could. So I do feel passionate to talking about how we can all continue to better our marriages, and especially when it comes to Yom Tov. Turn the phone over to my husband, Velvel.
Hi, everybody. My name is Velvel Lipskier. As he mentioned, communication. When we first got married, it was like the dirtiest word, and it was always spoken about. I have to communicate, and I had no idea what that word even means. Like, we're talking. What do you mean? And I actually learned this. Communicating are not the same thing at all, and talking is something that most people pick up naturally. And communicating is, in my experience, something that people do not necessarily pick it up naturally. Some people do, many people don't. But it's a learnable skill. So we're talking about Yom Tov. A friend of mine, his brother-in-law is a therapist, and he told me, every business has its season. So, for example, the paper supply stationery stores are busy before Yom Tov. Beginning of the school year, this time of year. And accountants are busy in Italy before tax day. And he said therapy, the word he uses, that's when people are busy. So that's when, because after Yom Tov, everything builds up and builds up and builds up. When Yom Tov comes around, by that time, things are ready to explode. So the main thing that I learned about Yom Tov is two very, very important things. And one was that Yom Tov is very stressful. Now, I don't have to mean that Yom Tov is that. So, of course, Yom Tov is, number one, Yom Tov is wonderful. It's a special time of year. It's a very holy time. It's a time that we could experience a lot of joy. It's a time that we feel close to Hashem. So when I mean a lot of joy, it's a time that we feel close to Hashem. So when I mean to say that Yom Tov is a stressor, I don't mean something negative. It's simply like if you're putting stress on a beam, so it could carry X amount of pounds. That's what we mean when we say stressing a beam, stressing a string, stressing a rope. You're pulling on it. So Yom Tov, you're pulling on it. So Yom Tov is a stressor in the sense that it's very, very taxing. It takes a lot. It takes a lot out of us, first of all, physically. Yom Tov is very expensive. Yom Tov is a big change of schedule. Many people have to take off many days of work Yom Tov. Yom Tov is a lot of late nights. So the first time, and I had to realize, yes, of course Yom Tov is wonderful and it's a stressor that we want, but it's something which we cannot ignore, cannot make believe, it's no big deal. It is a very, very big deal, and something that should be given its due respect, in the sense like in Miami we say respect the ocean. It's beautiful, it's wonderful, but understand that it's a big, huge force. So expect everything that it brings along with it. And the solution to that, for me, is to keep it simple. I'm going to pass the phone to Estie now.
You know, it says in Halacha that before Yom Tov you should prepare 30 days before. You know, Kaidem Achag, 30 days you should talk about the Yom Tov, get ready. And I want to just say that in this area of Shalom Bayis, get ready. And I want to just say that in this area of Shalom Bayis, of getting ready for Yom Tov, it's also important to prepare before the Yom Tov. And I'll talk a little bit about what I mean by that. That it's very important to plan ahead. When we plan ahead, when we plan ahead, everyone knows that when you plan a wedding or bar mitzvah or an upsharnish, the more you plan in advance, who's going to pick up the flowers, when is the flowers going to pick, where are they going to be delivered, who's picking up the challah. So when you plan ahead, usually things go smooth. We'll just play it by ear. And from my experience, at least for me in my marriage, the playing it by ear really didn't work, because for the simple reason that we're two different people who have different needs and different expectations and different likes and dislikes. So I'll just give an example. For example, one spouse may really enjoy a lot of guests. The other spouse may really not enjoy a lot of guests, specifically also certain kinds of guests or certain families. And if we don't communicate and discuss beforehand, oh, how many meals do you want to host? How many meals do you want to host? And then or about being a guest. Some people love to be guests. Another spouse may not enjoy being guests. They'd rather be home. And these kinds of things can cause a lot of friction and tension, a lot of discussing beforehand, okay, let's plan it out. Who's going to show with you? Who's staying? Are we going out? Are we going in? How many do you want? And basically to learn how to compromise, which is my next point, which is marriage. I heard the best line that I've heard about marriage is from the marriage therapist that we worked with, and he said, marriage is a negotiation of needs. And I thought it was profound because, we think of marriage, sometimes we have these unrealistic expectations. What's marriage? We don't know, love, it's this, it's that. But if you really boil it down, it's two people that both have needs, and it's about negotiating the two needs. And it's about negotiating the two needs. And if we look at it like that, then, I used to think I had no needs. I learned that I did. Maybe I just assumed I didn't, or I just expected them to be filled and then they weren't. But if we can see it like that, then if we sit down and negotiate, what do you want, what do I want, and how we can find an alternative. I love the idea of a third alternative, which means that it's not my way, it's not your way, it's our way. And when it comes to Yom Tov, if the couple can get together before, it doesn't have to be 30 days, it could be a week before, the earlier the better. I just want to say a little anecdote. When I was sitting up with my husband to plan this talk, it popped into my head, like, oh my God, we're for Yom Tov. And I said right away, by the way, this person invited us for Yom Tov. And this is just a habit that we've developed over the years to really go through the Yom Tov of, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? How many meals do you want to eat out? How many meals do you want to eat in? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What kind of shul do you want to go to? Which shul? All these things really help make that the actual Yom Tov is smooth and enjoyable and not as chaotic, and just enjoyable for the kids, for the family. So that's the idea, that everybody gets their needs met, and then everybody can enjoy when the actual Yom Tov comes. And I just want to say enjoy when the actual Yom Tov comes. And I just want to say, because some questions came in anonymously about, in general, marriage, what if one spouse is not happy? Do both spouses need to, think the marriage is okay for it to be okay? And I think that this point about, of course, both people need to be happy. That's not a marriage. A marriage means that two people are satisfied with what's going on. And if one person is dissatisfied, then that means the whole marriage has to recalculate and see what we can do to make both sides happy.
Okay, I want to pick up on the point that Estie just finished off. This itself should make you unhappy. So one of the things that I learned very early on, so somebody that was coaching us, he was not a certified therapist, but somebody I was talking to, and he said, Velvel, how many people live in your house, excluding children? I said 2, and he said, wrong, there's 3 people. There's you, your wife, and your marriage. And what I learned was you, your wife, and your marriage. And what I learned was that there's me, and I need to be nurtured as a person, and I need to get my needs met. And then there's Estie, and she is a person, and she needs to get her needs met. And then there's the coupleship. As an independent living, this is what the term they used me, that they told me, that the coupleship is an independent living, breathing thing that needs to be fed. Because it's very, very easy to drift apart. And this is something that happens over Yom Tov for me a lot because there's so much going on and because a lot of good things going on. And it's very easy for me to drift off kind of into my own world. You know, as a man, I go to shul a lot, or when we do visit New York, for us, that's where our families are from. We're visiting family, and we kind of get absorbed, and it's all wonderful. We get absorbed into the family, into the relatives, or to whatever's going on, and we're both having a wonderful time, but at some point, the marriage, meaning to say the coupleship, and I'll expound that marriage, meaning to say the coupleship, and I'll expound that what I mean by that in a minute, begins to disintegrate by itself because nobody's feeding it. So one of the things that we learned in therapy is this concept of a team, that we're on the same team. In other words, not only am I doing what I need to do, and not only is my spouse doing what my spouse needs to do, and not only is my spouse doing what my spouse needs to do, and not only are we getting our needs met, we're actually working together, we're on the same team. And one of the things our therapist taught us, a tool was, and we ask each other when things are getting heated up, who's the enemy? I'll say, Estie, who's the enemy? Estie will say, Velvel, who's the enemy? And I'm going to remember that Velvel, who's the enemy? And I'm going to remember that the enemy is the stress or whatever it is. The enemy is the fact that funds are tight. The enemy is that one of our children are not doing well in school. The enemy is that I'm uncomfortable in which shul to go to. The enemy is that I'm feeling this kind of pressure. Because if I don't do that, then I turn who's the enemy, and my spouse is the enemy. My spouse is the one giving me a hard time. And I have to remember that the enemy is the fact that I'm not getting enough sleep. The enemy is that I have to take too many days off work, and I'm worried about what's going to happen. And I'm just turning to the nearest person. When I'm able to do that, I'm able to get sympathy from my spouse. I tell you, you're not the enemy. And to say those words, and originally it sounds very, very plastic, very artificial, but it's something we learned how to do. Say it. Just say it. Say it. I'm sorry I made you the enemy. You're not the enemy. Here's what's really going on. So a tool that we use very often, we use it all year, but especially on this, is we do a check-in. And there's a format, we do a check-in. And there's a format that Estie learned, and we use, and again, it's one of those things that originally sounds very artificial because you're following the script and it's supposed to be more natural, but it works. It works if we follow the script. And what happens is, and I'll share the script in a moment, we're doing well. We don't need to have the script. We don't need to have this check-in because we're doing well. When we're not doing well, when things will feel like a breakdown of communication, that's when we need to use it. So, for example, if we're out for Yom Tov and we ate out 3 meals in a row, then maybe before Kiddush or waiting for the host to send a call, we'll call each other and say let's do a check-in. Let's kind of reconnect. Let's remember on the same team. The format for the check-in that we do is we ask each other 5 questions, specific questions. Question number 1 is an appreciation. I appreciate about you. Something I appreciate about you. Appreciate about you. Something I appreciate about you. And I focus on saying something positive about my spouse. It could be something personal. I appreciate the fact that you watched your kids this morning, I could sleep in. Or something, I appreciate the fact that so the appreciation could either be appreciate something you did for me, or just something about you, or something you did for somebody else, something kind. It doesn't have to be what you do for me. It could just be, I appreciate the fact the way you talk to the kids, or I appreciate the way you get along with your siblings, or whatever it is. Just an appreciation. That's question number 1. Question number 2, I forgot to tell you, news is, oh, by the way, I have an appointment, I have an engagement next Monday. News could be something that happened at work today. I want you, something emotional, or news could be something I'm feeling, something I want you to know about me. So, or like practical. So it's either one, but something new. News means new information that I would like you to know. Next question, and now that is not solution-oriented. It's just stating facts. The next question is solution-oriented. I have a problem. Here's the solution I'm proposing. The problem is that we're not getting enough sleep, or the solution is that maybe we should have a better routine for bedtime, and we'll discuss what that is another time. The next question is quizzes, which is very beautiful. Routine for bedtime, and we'll discuss what that is another time. The next question is quizzes, which is very beautiful. It's, I wonder what's going to happen. That's the opposite of the previous question, is that it's not solution-oriented at all. It's, I wonder what the Yom Tov is going to look like. I wonder if I'm going to end up enjoying Simchas Torah. I wonder if, and it can be short-term, something, I wonder what's going to happen in the next 5 hours, or long-term, I wonder where we're going to be living in 5 years from now. Whatever I'm feeling at the moment. And the last one is hopes and dreams, which is my hope and dream is, and again, it could be, my hope and dream is that I get to bed on time tonight, or my hope and dream is that my son goes to Yeshiva Eretz Yisrael. It could be something far off or something big for our house, whatever it is. Now, in the format, so we take turns. So one will do appreciation, the other will do appreciation. One will do news, the other one will do news. One will do problem solution, the other will do problem solution. One will do quizzes, the other one will do quizzes. One will do the important thing is that when it comes to the check-ins, a big issue is who's going to go first. And usually it's whoever is not doing so well. Like, for example, if I say, let's do a check-in, but could you please start? Because it can be difficult sometimes to start. So I'll ask, or Estie will say, let's do a check-in, and I'll start, or going. But it's helpful because we have a very, very specific format, and we could do it, and we can use it always to reconnect and get on the same team. I'll pass.
Okay, thank you, Velvel. So I'm just going to really conclude with 2 more points, and then I guess we could take questions. So the first point that I want to just conclude is and expound on is the keep it simple. I really feel that Yom Tov is stressful as is, and I just think that in general for Shalom Bayis and in general for life, dumbing things down, meaning taking the notch down, is always helpful all around. So meaning, if we had no all around. So meaning, if we had no guests, Yom Tov would still be stressful. Because like I said, late nights, change of schedule, so I just think that it's so important to keep in mind that we like to, I guess I'll talk as a woman, a lot of us women maybe have the same thing, or maybe men in their own way, a lot of us women maybe have the same thing, or maybe men in their own way, for bring-ins, Sukkot always was a big stress for me, Sukkot, how many for bring-ins are you going to go to, I can't handle you being out every night, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really important to, if we could try to, if we want to invite 5 guests, invite 4. If you want to invite 3, lower the notch in the house. And it's not worth it. I mean, for me, time and time again, I've learned, that extra meal and guests, was it worth, me and Velvel, having an extra argument. So I learned over the years that it's not worth it. Yeah, it's nice if I invite that new neighbor. But, me and my husband getting along and enjoying invite that new neighbor. But, me and my husband getting along and enjoying Yom Tov, and the kids feeling like there's shalom in the home is ultimately more important than that extra guest. So that's why, going back to the planning part is that when we're planning and checking in, let's try to lower the notch and bring down the expectations of what I would my hopes and dreams. I would like to invite so much, or I'd like to go out every meal, but so that we can really lower the stress, because Yom Tov is stressful as is, and adding things on. And then I'm just going to conclude with another point. About, in general, marriage and, especially Yom Tov time, resentments come up. Things don't go away. A lot of people, a lot of us, myself included, in my early years of marriage, I assumed that, if I'm not upset anymore, then, I'll just forget about it. Why should I bother? Why should I rock the boat? And what I've learned is that resentments don't go away, and they can build up for years. And when we were doing therapy, resentments came up. We were 6 years old. They were like from the first week of our wedding. And it was so interesting to me that I never heard about them, holding on to. And the idea is that people hold grudges. That's how we're kind of wired like that. And so it's so important to, and I wanted to say that I forgot to mention when I said about, planning it. If you sit down with your spouse and you have a really hard time coming up with a solution that works for both people, you may need a third party involved. I need it, and many couples, need that extra help. So don't feel bad if, you sit down and you're like, let's plan Yom Tov, and then it becomes a whole World War III, and no one can seem to compromise to the point where everybody's happy. Don't feel bad to feel like you need to bring somebody in, because whether it's a Rav, a good friend, a mashpia, or a therapist, because that third person can be objective and help and teach you how to communicate. But if the communication is not working between you, don't just give up and say, fine, you know what, let's just forget about it. It's not worth it. It is worth it, because every resentment builds up and it erodes the love that there is. So if a couple's trying to work it out and plan for Yom Tov or life or anything, and or a situation that happened, and it's not going, the conversation, which is what happened to me many times, and so we just gave up. It's so, I've learned that it's so helpful to have that third person to say, to just, to step in and really, rebuild or even learn communication.
Okay, so connection. Okay, so here's a practical question. Last year, Sukkot, my husband wanted the kids to stay up really late, and I thought practically the kids should go to sleep at a normal hour. This became a huge fight. Do you have any ideas of how we could communicate around that?
We had that same argument many times. My husband wanted to bring them to 770, some chasayra, wake them up in the middle of the night, and I thought it was absurd. I'm going to give a little bit explanation, describe how we communicate, like kind of give a synopsis of how we have a conversation, if that's okay. So the way we would do it is we would present the problem, like, okay, so and basically we would take turns talking. It sounds funny, but time each other, me and Velvel, especially when it's a heated topic. If it's something that's so heated that we don't get anywhere by just talking about it naturally, so we treat it like if it's a timed meeting. And I'll have 3 minutes to share, Velvel will time me, and basically I get to share everything I want about it, everything I feel about it. He can't interrupt me. He can't time me, and basically I get to share everything I want about it, everything I feel about it. He can't interrupt me. He can't ask me questions. He can't say but. He can't. It's just my 3 minutes. I have the mic. His mic is closed, and I get to say everything about why I think it's maybe absurd to go every night dancing. And I share all my feelings. They could be angry. They could be happy. They could be whatever they are. And then after a certain amount of time, because people can only listen for so much without exploding. So then the mic gets handed over to Velvel, and then the other spouse, and then same thing, 3 minutes. And we actually go back. The more you share, the more that comes up, the reasoning, the feelings, the why, because sometimes even myself, I'll say, I don't want it. And I have no idea why. But when I get the mic, all of a sudden I start talking, and all of a sudden my body, I just start saying, and it comes up why I didn't even want it, all my feelings about it. So for myself even, it comes up why I didn't even want it, all my feelings about it. So for myself even, it's astonishing what comes up when I get to share uninterrupted. So the idea is that we both get to share, and in those kinds of safe timings, things come up that neither of us realize we even thought or felt, and then and then because the more we share how we feel, first of all, the more I can understand my husband's point of view. I don't look at it as crazy so much. He doesn't look at my thing as crazy so much, because he gets to see that I'm not that crazy. There's a reason behind my madness, a logic, a feeling. And the more and more and more you share, and eventually, first after you share, before the other person takes the mic, they sum up what it is that you shared. So what I heard you say was, that's active listening. And then, and I say, no, you didn't hear me correctly. You missed out one point. And basically the idea is, did you hear me? Were you listening? Because a lot of times we talk and I assume the other person's listening, but they could be thinking about the baseball game. They could be thinking about the baseball game. They could be thinking about their share, or they could be thinking about the fact that I'm wrong the whole time and they didn't even hear what I'm saying. So it's very important to reflect back and say, oh, I heard you say this and this and this, and then we both do the same back. So that way, no messages are getting this and this, and then we both do the same back. So that way, no messages are getting lost. Everything is truly heard. So that's just a format that really works for us, and it can be used for any topic that's triggering, that's a hot topic, that's that can't be just discussed.
So I guess in addition to that, you have to have these conversations somewhat in advance because you may have to come back to it another night. For example, you can't come Erev Rosh Hashanah and say, I want to go to my parents tomorrow, or like the day before you have to be able to travel to your parents. There needs to have time for this conversation to actually work it through.
Yeah, you could have it at the last minute and see what happens.
Families have very different minhagim. I want to keep some of my family's minhagim, and my husband says that minhagim go according to the husband. Oh, wow. Do you want to go into that?
Yeah, okay, I guess I'll take this question. It's my turn. I have the mic now, so I'll talk about it. Okay, so I want to continue and ask these thoughts. So especially when it comes around Inyanim of minhagim and halacha, it's very easy for me to fall into the trap of right and wrong, that there's a right way and a wrong way. So, if it's my parents, your parents, okay, fine. Or if we're going to eat chicken or fish. But when it comes to these, these there's no compromising on. Fish. But when it comes to these, these there's no compromising on. This is halacha or this is minhag. And the truth is that if I want to fall into that trap of right and wrong, it could be about anything. It could be about who we're supposed to go to. Does it go to my parents, go to your parents? I could wrap anything in halacha, and I could always escape to the right and wrong. Ask myself, why is it important to do the minhagim? Okay, because the husband's right. Okay, fine. Yeah, there is a halacha like that. Okay, why is that the halacha? Why is the halacha that you follow the husband's minhagim, and what does it mean for me? Baruch Hashem, we both come from regular Lubavitcher families, so our family minhagim are not that different. We got married, and I went to say that my wife's family. I was surprised how similar it was, but of course there are many different minhagim, and then there's family minhagim, family traditions. People have ways of doing things. So as long as once we have a very open discussion, and like Estie mentioned, things come up for me which I didn't even realize, and I say, this is very meaningful. Things come up for me which I didn't even realize, and I say, this is very meaningful to me because it's something that I have a long memory of. All of a sudden, the openness and the willingness to accommodate the other person becomes very, very clear. And if it cannot be, so this is the appropriate role of compromise. So, for example, the Seder in our house, what we do is one night we do it like my family, and one night we do it like Estie's family. That was a simple solution because we have two Sedarim. Or when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, other kinds of minhagim, when there's a I guess this is the importance of Shalom Bayis and having and bringing God into it, is that when it really is about the compromise, it becomes a real shayla halacha. Of course, that's what you have a rub for, if it's a real issue. But what I discovered for myself is that 95% of the time, it's not something which a Rav needs to give a psak. If it really comes to that, you can ask a Rav for a psak. But usually, there's a lot of feelings involved, deep feelings involved. A lot of they're very good feelings. They're very, very positive feelings. I could say I have memories. I grew up in Crown Heights in those years. I have memories the way it was by the Rebbe, and I want to give over my children. And we could talk about that. What's the importance of that? But the important thing is for me to realize that a lot of this stuff, in addition to halacha, in addition to minhag, is also very deeply emotional. And when I could resolve the emotional side of it, then the other details are, fairly easily negotiated. They're fairly easily navigated. Once we get the feelings out in the open, the feelings out of the usually comes down to a small. It's not usually such a big difference, If it's Friday and Ashkenazim and somebody wants to keep kitnius on Pesach or not, so there are many Piskei Dinim about that. But in my experience, the difference in the minhagim are usually not that drastic.
Estie, or can I ask the next question?
Sure.
Okay. Another question.
Sure.
Okay. Another question. My husband has certain family minhagim of food, and he wants me to cook it. I don't want to. I don't know how to, and I don't want to. I guess it's like, do I have to? I guess questions is, do I have to make these? I guess questions is, do I have to make these interesting foods, or get the recipe, or work hard on a recipe that I don't want to make, just because my husband wants me to? Or I guess it's also in the way that he presents it, more than just that he wants it. Can you talk a little bit to that?
So what I hear in that question is a person feeling resentful about what they're doing. And it's a very dangerous game to play. I actually would say better not to cook the food than cook it with resentment, because resentment can really kill. There's a line about resentment that says it's like taking poison and hoping someone else dies. we really feel that if somebody is doing something for their spouse and they're not doing it from a place of love, the same goes for a neighbor, whoever else, a sister or mother, it needs to come from a place of love. And how that can happen is a whole, obviously these conversations that we spoke about and how you have a conversation, obviously these conversations that we spoke about and how you have a conversation is how you talk about it. I don't think that one person demanding of another spouse anything is going to be helpful for the relationship. And the idea is that nothing, everything that should go on in the marriage needs to be everything that should go on in the marriage needs to be discussed, explored, shared, and like Bob was saying about the emotions, it's the emotions that lay behind everything. And if we don't share how we feel, I just want to say I used to, if Bob did something straight out, like I really don't like that you don't talk to me. It sounds, why wouldn't you just say to the person what you don't like they're doing? And I feel like a lot of us go through marriage doing things or suffering or just, putting up with things that we don't like, we're not okay with, and yet we don't use our voices to share what it is that we're upset about. And on both sides of the spectrum, both spouses usually a lot of that it goes on. And the solution is simply communication, which is these kinds of conversations that are constructive, not conversation, which is these kinds of conversations that are constructive, not conversations that end in somebody storming off. But when two people are calm, things need to be negotiated and discussed and how everybody feels, and then they can conclude about what they want to be done. But to do something and not want to do it, it's not a labor of love, then it's going to not even be received by the other person.
So I'm thinking that in this question is also the, his assumption that she has to be doing all the cooking, and that assumption may not be practical or may not feel right on one. He has to be doing all the cooking, and that could be the resentment is in that aspect. Never mind in the specific recipe that he's asking for.
And all of that will come up in a conversation. If there is a conversation about it, then all of that will come up. Like, who said I even need to be cooking? If the emotions are actually brought up with all the feelings that everybody has, whatever's really going on beneath the surface, if everyone's given a chance to share, both spouses, everything's going to come up. All, the stuff is going to come up. So that's the idea of truly having everybody having a voice. So that whatever's going on for either of the spouses, is everybody having a voice, so that whatever's going on for either of the spouses is coming up. It's not being dormant. It's not just, not being heard.
Very, very important. And do you have anything that you want to wrap up this conversation with? Any wishes to our Shalom Bayis over Yom Tov?
I'll wrap up, and then I guess Velvel will share his bracha. For me, every year that my marriage gets better, my Yom Tov gets better. I even will make a comment to my husband, be like, I can't believe it. It's like Pesach, we're just enjoying Pesach, or it's Yom Tov, or Sukkot, whatever it is. It's not even stressful. It's barely stressful. It's not causing me all this anxiety. I'm just enjoying you. I'm enjoying the kids. I'm enjoying, and it's always a shock for me when I'm being contented and either of us are not really angry at each other, because we lived many of those days and years. So I guess my bracha is that, working on your marriage and working on your communication, then you will get to really enjoy the Rosh Hashanah, the Yom Kippur, the Sukkot, because you won't be focusing on how angry you are on your spouse about this or that, or how sad you are that you didn't do this or that, because you could really focus on the actual Yom Tov and appreciate the Yom Tov, as opposed to being focusing on all the other stuff that really can be worked through and cleared, and you're not focusing on the fact that, whatever latest resentment, you had that wasn't discussed. And I'll pass the mic. Good night.
First, I want to wish everybody a Ksiv v'chasim Torah. There's a new year ahead, and the new year, who knows what the year will bring? It will bring wonderful things. Years ago, when we were going through that stage of buying all the Shalom book, I don't want to mention by name or doing endorsements, but it said, bring your marriage to its fullest potential. And I remember reading that line. I had no idea what that means. What does it mean, bring your marriage? Your marriage is what it is. And what I discovered, and what we discovered, is that it's not true, that there's so much potential. Things are good, The famous life. There's so much potential. Things are good. The famous line from the Frierdiker Rebbe that said that if good is good, then isn't better. Things are good. Things are wonderful. There's so many treasures there for the taking. If I take the time to sit and discuss it, then all these beautiful minhagim, all these beautiful Yom Tovim could become so much more beautiful. So minhagim, all these beautiful Yom Tovim could become so much more beautiful. So a bracha to everybody is, go get out there. There's deep, beautiful treasures, and go search them because they're there to be had, they're there to be enjoyed. Have a wonderful and meaningful Tishrei. Thank you.
Thank you, Velvel. Thank you, Estie, and thank you all for joining.